And this is, again, is one of these moments where you go, maybe, maybe not. Maybe you're not the poor victims that you try and make yourself out to be. Also, the Democrats, and I'm going, yeah. Part of me goes, why would a Democrat jump in the middle of this? But Democratic Representative Robert Garcia, he is referring a resolution to the House Ethics Committee to oust Republican George Santos because I don't even know where you begin in the level of deceit, lies, fantasy. I don't know where you begin from being a Holocaust survivor or I can't even keep all of the craziness. It's so much. It's like that spaghetti theory, except all of the spaghetti stuck. I mean, that's really what it is. It's like a whole box just stuck to the wall and they're all lies. And my first reaction was, don't be stupid, Democrats. Don't bail Republicans out. They own this guy. They're allowing him to stay. They're in control. They're in charge. They should be taking care of their own. They should be policing their own. If they're okay with a serial liar yeah, never mind. We just had one for 4 years. So is it surprising to me that this is where they go? No, not so much. But we'll see where this goes. Now, there's the other part of me goes, this is a brilliant strategic move. Throw it out there because the Republicans are in charge. Make them make a decision. Say, look, we got to get him out of here for the good of the institution. We've got to save the institution. Make Republicans go on the record to say, no, he's a good guy. He's our guy. So I'm vacillating between the hang him around Republicans' neck and then, or, put them on the record for saving him. We'll see how this plays out. Also today, the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, they ramped up their tax on Joe Biden's son, Representative James Comer, the Republican from Kentucky, going full tilt boogie, full after the Hunter Biden. And what I found interesting is Representative Melanie Stansberry. She represents New Mexico's first congressional district. She and look, I absolutely agree 100% with her. When she had this to say.
What are we doing here in this committee today? Why are we here? Why is this committee devoting a day-long hearing to a political conspiracy theory that was planted in the media by Rudy Giuliani to support Donald Trump's re-election campaign? Of all the topics we could be focused on in this committee to support the American people, how people are going to put food on their table at the end of the day, how we're going to address the economy, how we're going to address critical issues that are on people's minds every day, we are devoting an entire day to this conspiracy theory involving Twitter. Now, the mission of this committee is to root out waste, fraud, and abuse and to conduct oversight on behalf of the American people. And if you need any evidence of waste, fraud, and abuse, how about the use of this committee's precious time, space, and resources to commit to this hearing?
She's not wrong. She's not wrong here, and she's spot on. You want to talk about waste, fraud, and abuse? We've got problems, and all they're going to do is focus on Hunter Biden. They got to get the laptop. I mean, it's amazing, to be honest. You listen to Republicans talk; they think Joe Biden's wounded. They think that senile. You name it. This is where they think. And you'd think they would come out with a plan for all of the things that they claim Biden has fallen down on. Oh, but no, silly American. Are you worried about the economy? Are you worried about that? Hunter Biden's laptop. That's the solution. Can't afford to send your kids to college? Hunter Biden's laptop. About to go broke and because of the high cost of medical care and prescription drugs? Hunter Biden's laptop. Being treated like garbage at work? Hunter Biden's laptop. Pothole out in front of your house not filled. Hunter Biden's laptop. Actually, that might be a good place for it, actually. But this is what we're going to get, a steady diet of division and Hunter Biden's laptop. Hunter Biden was a horrible person. Hunter Biden's laptop. And again, it's the outrage candy, it's the conspiracy stuff, it's the continually to feed us nonsense and garbage while not really solving any problems. Ever. I mean, it's quite remarkable. I look at Lauren Boebert, gun fetish Barbie, as I affectionately call her. She got her 5 minutes for the F channel to run ad nauseum when she tweeted out, "I received this document from Twitter staff last night. It shows that Twitter 1.0 executive shadow banned me as a sitting member of Congress. If they did that to me, imagine the millions of Americans that they will never know they were silenced by these woke executives." So she wants you to believe that there were these executives at Twitter who just didn't like her. She was just, she just mean. They didn't really like her. So they're gonna ban her. And you know what? If they don't like you, they'll ban you too. Now, the reality is, what happened was, she tweeted out on January 9th, 2021, "Hillary must be pissed it took the DNC until 2020 to successfully rig an election." This is one of those things that they looked at their terms of service and said that this is what the Twitter said. It violated their civic integrity misinformation policy. Again, this is a private corporation, private industry, which Republicans used to believe should be, private and not out of the control of government. She received a strike for this. Now, I have received many a strike over the years. And those are the rules, those are the terms of service, and that's how it goes. Now, is it right or is it wrong? We can debate that, whether the terms of service are good or bad or whatever, but you signed into them. You agreed to them when you signed up, because it's not the government. It's a private entity. But she's conflating the two, saying because of this tweet that violated their terms of service, that they believed violated their terms of service, that this is somehow shadow banning her. No, they sent her a notice saying, we're blocking you from being able to have your tweets seen by people who don't follow you. You don't get free carte blanche access and still get to violate our terms. Now, again, we can have this conversation, whether this is right or wrong, good or bad, it is what it is. But that's not what she's trying to do. It's the martyr. It's, oh, poor woe is me. Look what they did to me. Because evidently she kept getting new followers and the engagement wasn't there, because for that period of time, and they delineated it to her, she didn't get to go everywhere. Now that's like a child, like any parent with children, you discipline them. This was her discipline. Now, again, we can have this conversation whether it was right or wrong for a company to be able for the company to do this. But I don't know that we should have the conversation of can they. That sounds like something that socialists would say, not God-fearing Christian free market libertarian laissez-faire capitalists. No. But again, it's only when it suits them. And what's interesting to me is watching the Republican Party shift from that party of corporate America, and look, this is probably a good thing, honestly, to the party of socialized control of government. And this is the scary part, because that's really fascistic. When corporations and government, there's problems. And we can have conversations around, is that a problem? But what they're doing is grandstanding. What they're doing is the martyr stuff. They broke the rules, they violated the terms of service, and now they're playing the victim. Understand what free speech is in this country. Free speech is between you and your government. Free speech is not between you and me. You don't get to say whatever you want to me in my home. If you do, you will find yourself on the curb very quickly. That's reality. In the public space between you and your government, you have free speech. But you don't get to go into a private establishment. And the famous one is yell fire in a theater. You don't get to do that. And you don't get to cause mass hysteria on social media platforms. And at some point, there has to be a pulling back on what happens because social media is where, and I keep saying this all the time, people are their worst versions of themselves. I can't imagine that Lauren Boebert is as bad of a human being as she comes off on Twitter. At least I hope not. Or any of these folks. Some of the vile stuff that people say in these platforms because they feel that no one is paying attention. No one can touch them. No one can find them. It's amazing to me. And you wonder why we can't have any real discourse. You wonder why we can't have any real back and forth. The Social Security thing, for instance. The president did a masterful thing on Tuesday when he got the Republicans, all of their feigned outrage in the State of the Union address to say, no, they're not going to cut Social Security. No, we love Social Security. And then to watch them backpedal after decades of saying, yes, we absolutely are going to cut Social Security. Yes, we're going to stop it from growing. Yes, we're going to privatize it. Yes, we're going to do all these things that most people agree would harm the solvency and the future of it. Even my Republican friends. But I keep getting this, well, they don't really mean it. Yes, they do. And I find it interesting that, even Ron DeSantis, when he ran for Congress back in 2012, backed the idea of privatizing Medicare and Social Security, which everybody agrees, or at least most sane, rational people agree that putting those things in the hands of the profiteers is going to do exactly what happens every time we privatize something. Whether it's our roads and our bridges or our sewer and our waterways or our parking authorities or you name it. All of the things we have privatized down the line have ended up costing us more for less service and much more shoddy service. But there's a blind faith. This time we're going to do it right. And by doing it right, it means putting more money in their pockets and less in yours. It's the same thing with these Medicare Advantage plans. They give you nice little bells and whistles and, hey, look at the shiny stuff. But when you really need it, when it gets down to brass tacks, it's all about denying you service. It's all about fleecing the government for more by upcharging. It's all about what corporate America does masterfully. And that's line their pockets with massive profits. Do you think Social Security would be any different? Seriously. Had Bush been able to privatize Social Security back when that was the big thing back during his presidency, after the collapse and then the other collapses, do you think you'd have much? It'd be a lot like most people's 401ks. Empty. Lining the pockets of the companies who administer them. That's just the reality. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Got a lot to get to today. Want to hear your thoughts. Also, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Elon Musk fired one of his engineers over the fact that his views were declining on Twitter. Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. Evidently, there weren't enough people seeing his tweets. Musk said, "This is ridiculous. I have more than 100 million followers and only getting tens of thousands of impressions." An employee showed Musk the internal data regarding the engagement of his account with Google Trends. And I guess they told him Musk was at peak popularity and the search rankings. He had a score of 100. That's the score, he said, a score of 9 today. Engineers had previously investigated whether Musk had somehow been artificially restricted, but found no evidence. And so they fired him. He didn't take it well, was not happy, fired the engineer. And this is what happens when you have a crummy boss. It's the reality. Most certainly crummy boss. Now, here's the thing. What I love about what's going on is Biden is doing exactly what I said he should do. He's going full on working class hero. He's going full on engage the white working class voter and engage with those communities that feel like they've left behind. You know, the ones that Trump was talking to. And I've been telling Democrats this for almost 2 decades now. You've got to go to those places that feel left behind. You've got to reach out to them, have policies that are going to help them. And look, his blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America is exactly what was needed. It's what Obama should have been doing. They tried a little bit, but it's what they should have been doing all along. Reshoring manufacturing. Now, look, Democrats have a problem. Biden's got a problem. He voted for a lot of the bad Clinton-era stuff, just like a lot of Democrats did. That's what bipartisanship will get you. NAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, the end of Glass-Steagall, all Republican wet dream ideas, all, their thing, but in a bipartisan way, they brought conservative Democrats along and corporate Democrats along, of which Biden was one. There's no doubting, there's no denying Biden was one of the corporate Democrats in my view. This Biden, though, President Biden, and this is why I support him the way I do, I think he has seen what those policies have done to working class communities. And he's working to adjust. He's working to go, okay, we screwed this up. We've got to move in a direction that's going to make sure that we do rebuild those communities, that we do help those families, that we do make America strong. And I agree with him. The State of the Union is strong. I listen to Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I listen to some of the commentators on TV, and they're really hoping and praying for a collapse of the economy. They're hoping and praying for bad employment numbers. They're hoping and praying that what they keep shoveling at us happens. And look, the right-wing echo chamber is so powerful in this country. They've got people believing things are horrible. Are things perfect? No. Is inflation high? Yes. Nobody sees that more than I do. We went to the grocery store, 2 bags, $90. I get it. But I think the policies that this administration is moving on can help us move in a positive direction. Reshoring that manufacturing, shoring up our supply lines, getting people back to work, investing in infrastructure, good jobs. The way you deal with inflation, because again, I love my friends who email, and please email me often because it's really insightful into the conservative mind, rick@thericksmithshow.com. It's insightful to hear Republicans talk about how much they hate socialism, but then want Biden to act to lower the price on, you name it, eggs, gas, whatever. Like there's some kind of switch in the Oval Office that you go, oh yeah, lower the price. If Biden were to come out and say we're going to have price controls, you would hear the Republicans lose their minds. And all of those people who were emailing me, and again, thank you, saying, Biden needs to do something about price. If he did that, if he gave you what you wanted, you would still whine and complain. Because now that's socialism, and you can't have that. And yet Nixon did it. It's interesting how this all plays itself around. Now, I'm a bit frustrated in the moment because, look, the reality is we can't seem to have these conversations because we've got our red hat and our blue hat on. I want to put a hard hat on and rebuild things. I'm listening. I'm watching this train wreck of I'm in my camp, you're in your camp, and we can never agree on anything. Whereas there is so much we should be able to agree on. We can't. The China thing, for instance, should be able to agree. We don't want China to dominate manufacturing. We should agree that we don't want China to arise as the prominent military power. We should agree that there are things we should be doing to protect ourselves. But because it's the guy who's in the White House now, we can't. And this is the weird thing about where we were. And look, when Trump was in the White House, there were some on the left who would never come along. I wasn't that guy. When he proposed an idea of, hey, let's rebuild infrastructure, 100% on board. Day one said he does that, he's going to win re-election without question. In fact, if you remember, you had a number of Democrats going, hey, let's do this huge $3 trillion investment. Let's do this. And oddly enough, Republicans blocked it. They could have done an awful lot with that tax bill that they rammed through like thieves in the night. But they didn't. What they did is what their priority was. Their priority is making the rich richer. They did that. Mission accomplished. But nothing else. Because that's all they got. They're a one-trick pony. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day Sheriff Theodore Middleton and his deputies in Harlan County shot into the house of UMWA organizer Marshall Music, killing his 15-year-old son Bennett. Music organized for the UMWA's District 19. He traveled all over Harlan County. As a district organizer, he was beaten, arrested, and evicted from company housing repeatedly. Some of the mines were organized in Harlan County, but barely. Many coal operators controlled area sheriff's departments and restricted the daily life of miners and their union representatives. Organizing drives started in January of 1937. Union men faced extreme physical violence. Organizers were tear-gassed in early January. Their cars were dynamited later that month. Music and his wife were shot at and warned repeatedly to leave town. Another organizer had his door busted down by deputies and his house ransacked. Music finally agreed to leave town to keep his family safe. But on this day, upon arriving in Pineville, he learned his son had been killed in a firestorm of bullets shot into his house. On March 22nd, the La Follette Committee on Civil Liberties opened hearings into bloody Harlan. It lasted for 6 weeks. The Justice Department indicted 69 Harlan County coal operators and law officers for criminal conspiracy in violation of the Wagner Act. Meanwhile, the new National Labor Relations Board answered the UMWA charges and found in the union's favor. The board issued a cease and desist order against interference with union activity and ordered the reinstatement of 60 coal miners. As a result, union membership soared to 9,000. The UMWA would continue for decades to fight to keep Harlan County organized.
People are baffled by the surreal saga of George Santos, the bizarre Republican Congress critter who is a bottomless sinkhole of lies. How could he think that he, a highly visible public figure, could get away with such blatant fabrications? Perhaps he thought he was a corporation. After all, these multi-billion-dollar brand name outfits routinely lie about who they really are. Crass polluters shamelessly run PR campaigns claiming to be environmentalists, price gougers pose as consumer champions, and economic downsizers glorify themselves as visionary creators. They gild their resumes for their own profit, and they get away with it. So George might have thought, I'll follow the corporate model, just make stuff up, like soulless tobacco executives do. For decades, they killed millions of people for profit, flat out lying that nicotine was not addictive, that their cancer sticks were not deadly, and that they did not target their ads to children. But wait, today's tobacco titans claim to be born-again public health champions. We have an unprecedented opportunity to move beyond smoking, said the head honcho of the Philip Morris brand, asserting that Big Tobacco would henceforth back the public push for a, quote, smoke-free future. Philip Morris garnered widespread praise for this bold stand, but it was a deliberate lie. Even as the executives' lips moved, the tobacco giants were spending billions on lobbyists and PR campaigns to gut state and national proposals to prevent addiction and actually lead to a smoke-free future. This is Jim Hightower saying, yes, we should be outraged that Santos, a flagrant political fake, has swindled his way into Congress, and he should be ousted. But what will Congress do about the far more destructive corporate deceivers who are George Santos's role models? Their lies kill people, yet they're still welcome in the halls of Congress.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a little unity in Congress today. Resolution to condemn the Chinese balloon. 419-0 was the vote, condemning China for its, quote, brazen violation of United States sovereignty. They're seeking more information from the White House to find out exactly what the balloon was. And trust me, is as fast as this should go away, it is not going to. There will be weaponization hearings. There'll be oversight hearings. They may even get the banking committee into having a hearing on this because, hey, they're not going to oversee banking anyway. Why not do this? Because like I said at the beginning, worried about health care, Hunter Biden's laptop. Worried about your kids going to college, Hunter Biden's laptop. Worried about anything, here's the diversion. Here's the cat chasing the little laser pointer. And here to share some thoughts on the laser pointer, I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. Sarah's a reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello. Happy Thursday.
So balloons. Yes, balloons. Balloons. I thought this would blow over.
Narf, narf. I wish that it would have blown over, but sadly, they're still talking about it. And so they had the Gang of Eight briefing earlier this week. I guess the House had their briefing this morning. I don't think that they included anything that is like major intelligence, because it seems like the House really didn't have a whole lot of information. And the senators who were in the Gang of Eight had little information that they would give us. Yeah. Because of course they did.
Now I find it interesting that Romney said that Biden handled the balloon things right.
And I would say what's interesting is that a bunch of Republicans that we talked to on the Hill today and on Monday were kind of saying the same thing. They were hemming and hawing around it by, trying to say it in a different way. But essentially they were like, I understand why. I think they gave credit more to the Pentagon. They were like, I understand now why the Pentagon did what it did, why they made that decision. And they didn't really say much more. So I think you'll see some Republicans kind of shut up about blaming Biden for this, because it's very, very clear that the Pentagon was the one that was pushing him to, wait a little bit and see what we could capture from it. And we were blocking the signals to it. So why not?
And this is one of those things where, I said from the beginning, if you don't think that we saw it coming and tracked it every step of the way and were blocking whatever transmissions were coming and capturing whatever data that they were looking for, you're insane. We spend all this money on technology and military. Following a balloon is the least they should be able to do. And I see, look, someone who coached football for a while, you scout the other team. You want to see what they're looking at. You want to see what the playbook has because you want to be able to get some insight of what they're going to do. There's knowledge in this, except, I see those children in Congress, doing their thing. Marjorie Trainwreck, walking around with a balloon.
Mm. Oh my God, that was the most pathetic thing ever. And but I don't think that I wonder if she even went to the briefing, because it seems like something that she would just be like, no, I know everything I need to know.
No, but here's the thing, and I said it over the weekend. The scariest thing for me in this whole balloon saga was her tweet of, tomorrow I'm going to get a briefing in the Homeland Security Committee. To me, that's the scariest part. The fact that she's going to be in on those Homeland Security meetings.
I'm not sure that there's a lot of secret intelligence happening in that meeting, and I don't know the degree to which Homeland Security would be willing to turn over a lot of secret intelligence to that specific committee. I think the most important thing that was coming out of this is the intelligence briefing and the Pentagon briefings. I think it's funny that she thinks that she would actually get some kind of information from Homeland Security that she wouldn't have gotten from Intel or the Pentagon. It's just like, okay.
Now, I do find it interesting that Trump is now, like a lot of things, Trump is literally on every side of every issue. Just give him a couple of minutes, he'll find his way. Originally, I would have shot it down immediately. Now, kind of walking back that I would have shot it down immediately thing.
Well, then it became so it was like, I would have shot this down immediately, which pretty much tells you where it would have gone. Like, he wouldn't have had another option if he just shot it down. But then he decided, I would have made a deal with the Chinese where if they didn't give us what we want, then we'll shoot it down. If they do give us what we want, then I'll make the single greatest deal in history. And you're just like, God, you're such an idiot. But ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump.
Yeah, the art of the bad deal. Did you see Shinzo Abe's book that they're reporting that came out that said that they thought that Trump was so weak and so eagerly attempting to make a deal with Kim Jong-un that that he would basically give away the store? And how did they put it? That the world leaders were afraid that Kim Jong-un would learn of, how'd they put it? Trump's dovish tendencies. Yeah. I found that to be really, really a perfect statement.
It was a perfect statement, because it's not so much that, Trump plays this big game, this big
like any bully
sort of, like this attitude. But the reality is, at the end of the day, like, he's really not going to throw a punch. And that's sort of the way that he is about everything. And I think a lot of the world leaders that have talked about Trump since he left office have kind of said the same thing, where it's just like, he's all talk. We were really concerned what he would reveal to somebody because he was so desperate for them to like him. And I'm, it's not surprising to me that Abe would be concerned about something that he would do or not do. It's, everybody talked about how scary it was having him as a United States leader, from military, to folks in the White House. So we have to believe them when they tell us that.
Yeah, I mean, but again, it comes back to, Saturday Night Live's got a skit for everything. And I still never going to forget that, the lunchroom at where was it? One of the, like the G20 or something, where, never
that
mind.
Was the best picture. Oh, that was so good. That whole video where they just wouldn't shake hands with him. And then, that was so great.
No, but the thing is he did that to himself. I mean, the fact that he tried to alienate everyone, and this is where, again, you don't want a leader who's going to have that kind of personality, that I can do it alone, I can make the best deal, I've got the best words, I'm me. And this is where I think the contrast between the Trump era and the Biden era is, which is why I think, Tuesday's State of the Union was such a great speech. I mean, he blew my expectations away. Because look, I didn't have the bar really high. He, home run. I mean, he knocked it out of the park.
Like, I'm a big Biden fan, and have been for a long time. So I hate to say it, but my expectations were really, really low as well. And I was already grumpy that I had to work that night anyway. So the first part of it was, it was pretty normal. And I was surprised that he didn't, roll into the easy applause lines with, starting with the people in the first lady's box, because that's sort of the easy way to get the crowd into what you're saying. And he just went straight to issues and straight to owning the conservatives. And it was basically, an 80-year-old man beating up on 200 Republicans and winning.
No, but it's the speech that I would have written, because
Yeah.
it was all about how we're going to make working class folks' lives better, how we're going to move forward, how we're going to rebuild, revive, and reunionize this country. That to me was, and I said it before the speech began, this is where he's got to be. This is where Democrats need to find their wheelhouse. This is what they have to do if they're going to win elections going forward, is they need to get back into communities that feel abandoned. The people that Trump talked to, and talk the talk like Biden did, but also walk the walk as he laid out in his policies. So for me, it's all about, what are they saying? Dark Brandon, delivers. This is it.
Oh my God. All of the memes that came out of it were amazing. Lots of photos of Biden with sunglasses on, for Dark Brandon all over TikTok. But yeah, I think we've heard him talk particularly to union workers for the last couple of years. All of the union contracts that are coming out now for transportation and all of that, like they're bringing so many jobs to union homes that I don't see how anybody could ever compare it to anything that Donald Trump did. And I'm sure that there will be conservatives that who think that somehow Donald Trump still made their lives better, even though they worked less and made less. But it blows me away. It's just like, oh, finally we have a president who really values the middle class, the working, a living wage, healthcare, all of the things that working families really deserve. And I feel like we fought for so long. And I'm just like, oh, finally, right? Like there are still some wars that we have to fight. There are still some things that we're trying to get, like our, equal rights for women to be able to govern themselves. But the very least, folks are making, a little bit better wage and have jobs this time around.
I found it interesting that some in the media were focused on, you brought up, women's rights and, that he only spent 42 seconds on abortion or on choice. You got a problem with that?
I think he said what he needed to say, and it's like, sure, you can pass whatever you want to, but I'm going to veto it. So bite me. I mean, there's really nothing else that you need to say. I'm good. I'm good with that.
For a guy who gave the longest speech in the last 60 years, he was fairly concise on that on a lot of issues. I mean, there were a lot of issues in that speech. There was a lot to dig into.
And I feel like it would have been a little bit shorter if Republicans had just shut up, because I feel like he probably ad-libbed a lot more than what was in the speech whenever he started going after Republicans and fishing a little bit for their boos and then leading them into a cheer.
Did you find it humorous, like as I did, that James Carville, who said that I tell people I have the equivalent of a PhD in white trashology, and we saw real white trash on display. The level of white trashdom in the Republican Party is staggering. Carville said, I mean, for somebody that has observed it for a long time, like I have, I've never seen it manifest itself on a level that it's manifesting itself now. Well,
the other thing is that only James Carville could get away with that.
Yep.
Because he is sort of from the white trash world. Like I hail from redneck blood, right? So I feel like those are my people that I can trash. Whereas James Carville is like, the white trash are his people. And so he knows that. And I remember, what was it, a couple of weeks ago, somebody wrote about Marjorie Taylor Greene and called her low rent, which I feel like was really the polite way of saying white trash. but James Carville just went there. And I was just sort of half listening out of my mind or out of the corner of my ear. And then I was just like, oh my God, did he just say what I thought he said? And sort of ran it back and was like, oh, wow. Okay, well, there we go.
No, I mean, I was like, wow, because he's famously quoted with the Pennsylvania statement of Pittsburgh on one end, Philadelphia on the other, and Alabama in the middle. And again, only he can come out with that and say something like that. Anybody else would have just been, just skewered.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I would have extended white trashdom to the whole Republican Party. I think that there are a lot of rednecks mixed in there because I see a lot of my uncles in there. But whatever you want to describe it as, I say go for it. I'm not sure what you would call George Santos, but he's something is what he is.
A criminal? Maybe?
A criminal, right?
I don't know.
He's just sketchy dude.
Sketchy's a good one. Sketchy.
Yeah.
Okay, we can go there. So let me ask you, since you brought up Santos, good idea, bad idea? Representative Garcia, telling the ethics committee he wants him out. I think the Democrats. The part of me goes, the Democrats should stay the heck out of it. We'll let the Republicans wear this. But I also think that it's brilliant in the fact that Republicans control everything now, and by making them decide, yes, we're going to vote to keep him. I'm now rethinking the strategy here a little bit.
So I'm kind of the mind where you can't lose in this situation, because even if Democrats lobbied to push him out, then McCarthy would have one fewer vote that he could rely on, at least for several months before they could get somebody elected and get somebody in that office. And then, the alternative is they're going to, get rid of him. And then again, they're going to have one fewer vote to count on. And so I feel like Democrats win either way. And you're right. We can all just sort of sit back and be like, entertain me. Dance,
where's the popcorn?
Dance.
Yeah, dance, monkeys. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website if you want to check out her incredible work. I got to get your thoughts on what was one of the creepier responses to a State of the Union that I've seen. I questioned Sarah Huckabee Sanders as the person giving the response because I think she's off on the fringe anyway. But wow, she did not disappoint with the crazy. In fact, I loved her frame of normal versus crazy, and it got me questioning, which do you think you are in this equation?
Yeah, that was the best thing, and it was hilarious that she said it, because then everybody else was just like, "Oh wow, finally we agree on something. This really is normal versus crazy." I heard somebody comment on it. I don't remember who it was. Said that this really wasn't a speech for America; it was a speech for Donald Trump. And I think I buy that. I mean, it was very much like that whole section about how she traveled with Donald Trump and it made them feel like they were in the military. That was the thing where I feel like the whole country just groaned and rolled their eyes at once together.
Yeah, but if you listen to Lou Dobbs, Lou Dobbs said that no, she didn't do enough paying of homage to Trump.
Okay, sure. You do you, Lou Dobbs. I think she did plenty, even if she didn't say his name. I think this idea of the apocalypse of, us living in the Walking Dead, was news to a lot of people. I think a lot of folks were like, wait, what? What's happening? Because if you don't watch Fox News all day long, you really don't hear these kinds of abbreviations and terms and these culture wars. I'm shocked that she didn't go after M&Ms at one point, and have a whole discussion about the fat M&Ms. Who knew? Remember the obese M&Ms that Tucker Carlson freaked out about? And you're like, dude, they have peanuts in them. You idiot. Come on. Peanut M&Ms.
Oh, jeez. Look, the sad thing is it's funny, but it's dangerous. I mean, because
I know it's so hard because you want to laugh because it's, it is funny, but at the same time you're like, God, this really sucks because it's scary. But again,
I want to mock her.
Part of me,
I want to mock her.
And the whole time I was watching it, I was just like, oh my Lord, she is wearing white before Memorial Day.
No, I want to mock her in every way, shape, or form. But the reality is I know there are people who they want her as president someday.
I know.
And that woman is president. What?
Yeah, there's no way that's gonna happen. I mean,
please don't say that.
Well, here's the thing, right? Like, people used to talk about how unattractive Hillary Clinton was. It's like, my mom still thinks she has a glass eye. So, like, there's, Sarah Huckabee is not, the most glamorous person to stick up there.
Yeah, but she's ugly, but I don't care what she looks like in the mirror. She's ugly inside to the core. That is an
That's
ugly
true.
human being.
And I think that's what will turn a lot of people off. And again, like, this was a speech that was really just for 30% of the country. It wasn't for the rest of it. And if you're really trying to persuade the rest of the country right now, if you're trying to pull people onto your side, when it's very clear that America does not support any of the things the Republican Party is doing, I think that was the wrong message to try and hit people with, because I think folks just tuned that out.
Yeah, speaking of hitting people, January 6th, the little insurrection thing, the guy who carried the Confederate flag through the Capitol, 3 years in jail today.
3 years. Bummer. Sucks to be you. That's all you can say, right? It's just like, sucks to be you.
Finally, speaking of jail, I saw this story. Maybe you can help me with it. Evidently, Donald Trump says he's going to hand over his DNA. Granted, he's late. I mean, the deadline has passed, and this is kind of, again, I think, like the tax returns. I'll give them to you, never. But this is the first I've heard that there's a dress. This is the first that and I haven't really been following this, but this is the first that I've heard. There's a black coat dress. Stains on the black coat dress, potentially.
So that was one of the things that she talked a little bit about. I think it was in her book, where she mentioned that she still had the garment that she was wearing. And I can't remember again, like, I think you're right. Like, it was a coat dress or something. But yeah, she said that she definitely had it. There has been, and he's willing to, give forth his DNA. What is interesting about that is there is now also this conversation about the statute of limitations in the state of New York. And New York has this sort of weird, obscure law that says that if you are out of the state for 5 years or for however many years, that those years don't count as the statute of limitations on this case. So the statute would actually be, the 4 years that he did not live in New York and was living in Washington, you could reduce his, that statute by 4 years. I don't know if that's how that's going to work. I don't know if they're going to really make that argument. That's just what the legal nerds have been saying.
Yeah. Like, there's no way he's convicted on a criminal charge of this. Maybe this is part of because this is part of a civil trial. I don't want to get people all. He's going to go to. He's not. I don't think any of that's going to happen. But I do find it interesting.
He hasn't settled it though. I mean, really shocked that he hasn't settled it out of court.
Well, I don't think she'll let it be settled out of court.
Fair, yeah.
I mean, if I'm her, there's no way I settle this. I want if honestly and truthfully,
if it's true,
yeah, you want to take this to the end no matter what, because I don't think she needs the money. It's not like you can strong arm her and go, well, you're not going to be able to put food on the table. Take this meager sum to shut up and go away. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is about if it happened, and I'm not saying it did or it didn't. I'm staying out of it. I don't know, wasn't there. But if it did, I'd be taking it to. Wow, never mind what I would have done, but that's a whole nother story for a whole nother show. But we'll see. We'll see if the DNA ever comes forth. I say never going to happen.
I don't think he would either. I think it's probably just him bloviating, and I think his lawyers are going to be like, you need to shut up and stop saying that you're going to do this because you're not.
Yep.
Yeah.
As any good lawyer worth their salt would do. But Sarah, appreciate the time as always.
Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
Thanks so much, our good friend Sarah Burris. Check out her work, rawstory.com, where you find that. Quick break, right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1854. That was the day that novelist George Leppard died in Philadelphia. Leppard was friends with Edgar Allan Poe. He is most well known for his novel about Philadelphia, titled Quaker City. The book is considered to be one of the first American muckraking novels. Muckrakers write to uncover misconduct or muck in public life. The book cast the city elites in an unflattering light and explored the crooked underbelly of the city. The elites did not much care for the book, but the working class made it the best-selling novel in the country. In 1849, Lepard helped found the Brotherhood of the Union, which later became known as the Brotherhood of America. It was a secret benevolent society, a kind of Freemasons for the working man. The Brotherhood issued badges and medals. They borrowed from names and symbols of the American Revolution. They promoted a shorter workday, education, and election reform. By 1850, the Brotherhood had expanded to 19 states. Lepard was elected Supreme Washington, the highest title for the leadership position of the group. He died a few years later, succumbing to tuberculosis at the age of just 31. But the Brotherhood continued long after his death into the late 20th century. In a book about New York, Lepard once wrote, "Enormous wealth is only enormous crime. Yes, we may phrase it as we will, the immense concentration of wealth in the hands of any one man or in the hands of any corporate power is an evil fraught with more danger to the happiness and liberty of the nation than all the crowned tyrants of the world." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Another tragedy in New Jersey. Wow, a New Jersey council member, New Jersey City council member shot dead. This is the second member of a New Jersey municipality shot and killed in the last week or so. What is going on in New Jersey? Wow, shot and killed yesterday in his car. You go, wow, what is going on there? It's crazy. Also, it looks like Labor Secretary Marty Walsh going to be stepping down, going to take the commissioner's gig at the NHL. Good on Marty. Marty's going to get the gig at the NHL. Now the question: who should be his replacement? A lot of good names being popped up. Nancy Pelosi is pushing former Representative Sean Patrick Maloney into that spot. I don't know. I could think of like 100 people that I would like to throw in there. Beside that, maybe my friend Sarah Nelson would be good. It would be great to have a labor person in there like Marty, someone who's been in the trenches, someone who's been out there fighting for workers. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, remember the child labor thing we talked about? We're going to pick up on the other side. Back after this.
To maintain the strongest economy in the world, we need the best infrastructure in the world.
President Biden touts climate action and infrastructure upgrades in State of the Union address.
Law enforcement officials said their plan was to, quote, completely destroy the city.
FBI disrupts neo-Nazi plot to attack Baltimore's power grid. Plus,
Minnesota is not going to wait any longer. Minnesotans are not going to wait any longer.
Minnesota enacts ambitious law to go 100% carbon-free by 2040.
All of those ambitions and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
And my Republican friends who voted against it as well. I still get asked to fund the projects in those districts as well, but don't worry. I promised I'd be a president for all Americans. We'll fund these projects, and I'll see you at the groundbreaking.
Oh, snap. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we have seen a lot of State of the Union addresses in our days, yes. But boy howdy, was that a thriller on Tuesday night.
Indeed, in his second State of the Union address on Tuesday night, President Joe Biden highlighted his major legislative accomplishments, including new laws helping veterans exposed to toxic burn pits and long-deferred infrastructure repairs and projects now getting underway under the bipartisan infrastructure law. Biden touted direct benefits to everyday Americans from that bill and the Democrats' landmark climate and infrastructure bill signed into law last year, the Inflation Reduction Act. Both laws have generated a surge of major infrastructure projects, domestic manufacturing projects, and thousands of new jobs, which Biden characterized as an investment in America's long-term resilience.
The Inflation Reduction Act is also the most significant investment ever in climate change. Ever. Lowering utility bills, creating American jobs, leading the world. We're rebuilding for the long term. New electric grids that are able to weather major storms and not prevent those forest fires. Roads and water systems withstand the next big flood. Clean energy to cut pollution and create jobs in communities often left behind.
Biden also chided congressional Republicans for opposing both bills, framing action on the climate crisis as a moral obligation.
Let's face reality. The climate crisis doesn't care if you're in a red or blue state. It's an existential threat. We have an obligation, not to ourselves, but to our children and grandchildren, to confront it. I'm proud of how America at last is stepping up to the challenge.
And I'm proud about the fact that after years and years of complaining that presidents were not even mentioning the climate in their State of the Union address, we now have a president who is touting some huge accomplishments in that regard.
Yep, and Biden also, by the way, called for higher taxes on the oil and gas industry, which hit all-time record profits in 2022, and he criticized the industry for keeping supplies tight and prices high, exacerbating inflation as Americans struggled to afford energy and food.
And in the middle of a war, something we used to call war profiteering.
Because of those record profits, British oil giant BP this week announced it is watering down its climate pledge to reduce emissions by 2030 while increasing its investments in oil and gas.
Who could have guessed it?
Big Oil's record profits in 2022 have renewed calls to repeal billions in permanent tax breaks and subsidies that are given to the oil industry every year.
How about we just repeal the oil industry?
In other news, the Federal Bureau of Investigation announced this week the arrests of 2 neo-Nazis who the agency says were plotting to shoot up multiple electric grid substations in Baltimore, Maryland, in a racially motivated attack that they hoped would cause widespread disruption and spark a race war. An FBI bulletin in November warned of threats by domestic violent extremist groups to attack critical infrastructure to, quote, create civil disorder and inspire further violence. Since 2016, white supremacist plots targeting energy systems have dramatically increased in frequency.
How targeting power grids somehow leads to a race war is kind of beyond me. Then again, I'm not a Nazi.
Finally, with Republicans holding the U.S. House majority, climate action is stalled in Congress for at least the next 2 years. But states are picking up the slack. In Minnesota, Democratic Governor Tim Walz signed into law one of the nation's most ambitious climate laws, requiring the state's electric utilities to reach 80% renewable generation by 2030 and fully 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040.
Nice. That's one. Just 49 other states to go. For much more on all of these reports and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, Twitters, and Mastodons at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday on the program, we talked about this piece of legislation banging around in the Iowa Senate, I believe it is, that would change some of their child labor laws. And like I said, You look at the movement that's going on in this country. It's all about forcing poor women to have children because we need that cheap labor. And I go back to that Tom DeLay quote from 2007 where he said, hey, we wouldn't need immigrants if we had those 40 million children that have been aborted because we could put them right to work doing these cheap labor jobs. And you go, 2007 today, it's about 16 years. So it seems like the plan, force people into having kids, get them to work those crummy jobs that nobody will take except for people who are at the most desperate point, seems like part of the plan. And here to share some thoughts on this piece of legislation, I've asked Jennifer Shearer to come talk with us. She's the senior policy coordinator with the Workers' Power Project at the Economic Analysis and Research Network, part of the Economic Policy Institute. That is a mouthful. You can check out their website at earn.us. We'll get links out on social media. Jennifer, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, you bet.
So walk me through what this legislation is. I'm reading it. It says, the way I'm reading it, we're going to open up more hours for kids 14 and 15 to be able to do more dangerous jobs than they'd been done in the past, working around coolers and things like this. How bad is this? Or is this just common sense moving forward? I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, it's shocking, truly shocking, and really flies in the face of common sense and also, decades of research about what we know about children and youth and teens, their physical development, their mental and emotional development, their education, and their ability to learn to be productive workers in a healthy fashion. So the bill is sweeping. It proposes at least over 20 different changes to state child labor laws in Iowa. And so it's complicated in one sense, but I think what's not complicated is that it is part of a very coordinated national industry initiative to roll back protections that have been in place for decades. And you are right, it both proposes extending the number of hours that 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds can work during school year. It also removes from the prohibited list certain occupations that for years have been deemed hazardous based on the fact that youth are more likely to be injured or disabled when doing them, or exposed to hazards that could have serious long-term harm. The other thing that it does is create an entirely new category of jobs that can be applied for through what are called work-based learning programs. Now, in theory, there's nothing wrong with work-based learning, but as with everything, this is devil in the details kind of situation. So the definition of work-based learning in this bill includes removing any restrictions whatsoever, in theory, because it allows the labor commissioner to waive prohibitions on hazardous work for 14 to 18-year-olds, as long as they are falling under the umbrella of this broadly and frankly not really defined category of work-based learning.
So let me ask you this. So if
a 14-year-old could be doing any job. Yeah.
Right. So if someone, let's say the meatpacking industry says, you know what, we're going to start an apprenticeship program to work on the kill floor. But we're going to partner with the local, public school, the local school district, and we're going to have this pipeline. We're going to bring in kids. We're going to teach them to work on the kill floor. At 14, could they conceivably get a waiver to do that?
The way this legislation is written right now, anyone could get a waiver. Yeah.
I mean, because I see that as the most extreme case. Because not too long ago, there was the story that came out that in Iowa, I guess it was, you had a number of immigrant children working in these facilities, 13, 14 years old, while going to school during the day, working at night. It seemed curious that this bill would now come out now after that story to kind of be the pathway to making that kind of behavior legal. Or am I being conspiratorial?
No, I think that's exactly right. And I think we know that in part from what groups like National Federation of Independent Business, National Restaurant Association, industry groups themselves are saying. So they know that many of the provisions in this state legislation directly contradict and conflict with federal laws, which even if this bill were to be passed tomorrow in its current form, the federal law preempts and overrides much of what this bill would say in practice. Their goal is to ratchet down regulations across the country. They've floated this, similar pieces of this legislation in Ohio and Wisconsin, in other states, and they've been very upfront about the fact that their long-term goal is to put enough states on the path of rolling these standards back so that they can convince Congress to roll them back for the whole country. And I think you're right, that I think one way we have to view this is the reality is there are many corporations that aren't waiting, they're not asking permission to violate these laws. They're already doing it. Investigations, as you said, of multiple meatpacking facilities in the Midwest right now, the Hyundai Kia auto supply chain in Alabama, multiple factories under investigation, already facing fines for having workers as young as 14 in full-time production jobs. Those violations are happening. They're happening in fast food at significant, disturbing numbers. And so it is absolutely a way for corporations to take a step toward legalizing the practices that they're already implementing.
Now, it seems like we're going back 100 years, especially on this law. But here's the thing: you hear this kind of revisionist history, and I got a bunch of people yesterday emailing me, going, when I was 14, I did this job. When I was 13, when I was a kid, you hear this kind of stuff all over we didn't have all these protections. And I go, nonsense. Yes, you did. No one was allowed to use the meat slicer unless you were a certain age. And I'm old enough to remember that. That's right. How much of this kind of, we're just trying to get kids, into the workforce, trying to give them the skills that they're going to need. Because, and I'm sure you've heard this, today's kids are just lazy. They just want to lay around and do nothing. They got to get to work. They got to know what it's like to earn a buck. I guess the question that I'm coming up with is, how is the rhetoric that we keep telling ourselves affecting the policy that they're trying to ram down our throats?
This is a little bit personal to me, I have to say. I worked in a grocery store for several years in high school. I did a lot of babysitting. I helped my brother with paper routes. I learned valuable lessons and skills from all of those jobs as a young person, but that's absolutely right. I wasn't allowed to go behind the deli counter and use the meat slicer with no training. And I think about the difference between that and my grandmother, who was the daughter of immigrants to Iowa and whose mother died when she was 10 years old. And from that time on, who was an unpaid domestic servant in other people's houses until she turned 19 or 20. And is that acceptable, right? I mean, these are work occurs on a spectrum of acceptable to unacceptable conditions. And the reason we have child labor laws and boundaries around what is acceptable and not acceptable is because we know that children, when forced into situations against their own will, because their families are desperate, because their families are poor, are harmed. And my grandmother for years did not talk about her childhood because of the kinds of trauma, physical and mental, emotional, I don't know what other kinds, because some I'm sure she didn't ever tell us about, that she suffered. So I think we all know that there are forms of work that are healthy, safe, developmentally appropriate, age appropriate for youth, and that there are forms that neither we nor our parents or children would want to be part of.
No, you're absolutely right. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Jennifer Shearer. She's a state policy coordinator for the Workers' Power Project with the Economic Analysis and Research Network, earn.us, their website, a part of the Economic Policy Institute, epi.org, their website. We'll get links out on social media so you can check out all the incredible stuff that they do. But Jennifer, the part that really gets me is, all of the talk of, what we just went through is bad enough. They go even further into saying that, along with, these waivers and these exemptions, because there's now going to be a pipeline and apprenticeships or pre-apprenticeships or whatever they're going to create, is this shielding corporations from liability. I'm like, are you kidding me? We're going to shield corporations in the event that a child is killed on the job. We're completely usurping labor law in this country to get cheap labor into some of these interests, into some of these business interests. This is, for me, probably the most egregious of all of this bill. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, there is a component of this bill that explicitly says that an employer will bear no responsibility, no liability in the event that a student, a youth worker, is sickened, injured, or even dies while they're engaged in some form of work-based learning. So, that sets up a situation where, again, we talked earlier about the reality that the proposed structure of work-based learning in the bill opens up the potential for any age teen to be doing any job as long as they obtain a waiver. So there is both the removal of all of the existing research-based restrictions on hazardous work combined with complete immunity. So what incentive does that leave employers to provide proper training, provide proper equipment, provide and remove hazards from a workplace? I think the other part of this that we should acknowledge, and I think we can't talk about child labor in isolation from all other forms of labor. The conditions that children work in are, affect the conditions that adults work in. And we know that ratcheting down those standards means lower standards for everybody.
Absolutely. And this is one of those things where you're going to use this law. And I've had people say, well, parents won't allow this, and there are good companies out there going, parents aren't going to know. And a lot of them are going to be in poverty situations where they're going to have to look the other way because they need the income to survive. And you're always going to have these race to the bottom corporations who are going to cut corners and shift liability and blame somebody else just to make a profit for themselves. So this is why we have regulations. This is why we have standards. And I know my Republican friends love to scream, job killing regulations. But the reality is the lack of regulations cost people lives. And I go back to the breaker boys, in the mines 100 years ago who lost fingers and arms, and the people who worked in the mines, the kids who lost legs. What happens to them in this environment if that happens? We don't have a social safety net that's going to help them. The companies aren't going to be liable. Who's going to be responsible? Who does this fall on the shoulders of? The people who are least able to shoulder it. And that, again, is another problem I have.
So that is a frightening scenario, and I had thought about that as well. That well-intentioned parent whose child may be recruited to be part of a so-called work-based learning program. What happens if even under the best circumstances where there wasn't some kind of intentional negligence on the part of an employer, but an accident happens, and their child needs serious medical treatment, or their child is permanently disabled? Who bears the expense of that under this bill? I think it falls back on the family. And there's no reason to think that any family would know that ahead of time. So it seems incredibly deceptive and misleading to set up a structure like this as well.
So let me ask you the last line of questioning I've got for you. Now, this has got to be, on a certain level, once it's explained to people, it's got to be unpopular. What are the chances this gets through the Iowa Senate? I guess this is Senate File 167. What are the chances of this getting through the Senate, the House, and then getting onto the governor's desk and becoming law?
I hope there's no chance. And I think you're right that it is extremely unpopular. And I think we heard that in the testimony that folks began to give during a subcommittee meeting on this bill today. We're seeing that in the news coverage. And I think people are going to continue raising their voices in alarm and protest about what's being proposed. I think the obstacle and the problem, of course, is that too many of our state leaders are answering to out-of-state interests or to a handful of wealthy, well-connected business and industry employer groups who do not represent the popular will of the people. And so that's how this is going to play out. But I do think many people are going to continue to raise their voices in opposition to this.
The sad reality is this is another one of those moments. Never let a good crisis go to waste, and they're not. They need cheap labor, and where do they go? We're going to go get the children. Scary, scary stuff. But Jennifer, I appreciate you taking some time, filling us in and keeping us up to date. I hope you'll come back and keep us up to date on what's going on as this hopefully dies a death soon. Thanks so much.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks so much, Jennifer Shearer. She's the senior policy coordinator there at the EARN Group, the Workers' Power Project at the Economic Analysis and Research Network. We'll get links out, earn.us. Quick break, right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Yeah, this is another one of those things. And it's amazing to me. It's another one of these things that we do to people. Gotta get that cheap labor. Gotta get the cheap labor. The exploitable labor. Now, what's interesting to me as I look at a piece of legislation, this is bipartisan. Look, you've got a Democrat in Massachusetts who has proposed a piece of legislation that would allow people who are incarcerated to get time off of their sentence if they donate organs. Stop and think about this one for a moment. Let this sink in. How desperate, I got to get out of prison. Here, take my kidney. Seriously. It's the world that we're wow. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. How we doing, Alice?
We're doing insane. I wondered if you saw that the Missouri Republicans blocked a proposed ban on kids, under 18, carrying guns openly in public.
Yeah, the gun fetishists. They pose their infants with guns. Are you surprised?
Oh, I'm not surprised, but I thought, I sat there and wonder and go, okay, so you have a 13, 14-year-old wandering around with their AR-47 and decides to go a little bit nuts, and then the Republicans get to scream about, how the Democrats are causing chaos in the cities or something. I don't know. But it just seems to all tie in together.
No, it does. It all ties in perfectly together. They want cheap, exploitable labor. They don't care about anything else. That's what it's about. And that's the frustrating part of the moment that I'm in.
Yeah, me too. And also, I wanted to say, I helped out at the food bank, local food bank today, and everyone was up in arms because they had received, these older people that were on Social Security had received a notice that their food stamps were being cut because of the increase in their Social Security benefits, that Congress had passed a new law lowering their benefits. And I thought, oh, yeah, okay, something else to cause chaos.
Yeah, well, scary, scary stuff.
There you have it. So you have a good evening, Rick.
Appreciate it, Alice. Thanks so much. No, I mean, that's the sad thing. It's the world that we live in. It's when it affects us. Only when it affects us do we really care. And I go back to this story in Massachusetts. This idea that we're gonna what the heck, people who are incarcerated, they might want to get out an extra 60 days to a year. Are you going to give up a kidney for a year out of jail? I don't know that I'm thinking that. But they claim that the intent of this bill is because Black and brown communities are overly incarcerated, and the need for bone marrow and organs is so great in those communities that, hey, you've got a group of people there that you could pull from. So the idea is to start this bone marrow and organ donation program within the State Department of Corrections that would allow the individuals who are locked up to get as much as a year off. And I'm going, there's so many questions here. And it brings up just an incredible amount of the ability for abuse. Are we going to allow people to start buying organs? I mean, is this where this is going to go? Because in this country right now, you can't buy organs. Are people going to be desperate enough? Think about this for a second. Are you desperate enough to sell a kidney? What if someone offered you 20, 25 grand for it? Would you sell your kidney? How much is that worth? And I've got some free market friends who go, it's a commodity. It's in high demand. If you've got one, you should be able to negotiate for it. I'm a little leery on that. I'm a little leery on opening that up. I'm curious your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Now, as we know now, federal law bars that from happening. You can't sell human organs or acquire it for something that's valuable. And what they're arguing is that this bill would be unconstitutional and would be illegal because unlegal. What a moron. Would be illegal because it violates that part of you can't acquire something of value. And the argument would be a year out of jail would be something of value, even if it is the state doing it. I find this, predictable. I mean, we're moving towards the Hunger Games kind of scenario, kind of world. So this kind of stuff, I guess it doesn't really surprise me. What does surprise me, it's a Democrat who put it forth. I don't get it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If there's something I'm missing, I need to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith. The year was 1854. That was the day that novelist George Lepard died in Philadelphia. Lepard was friends with Edgar Allan Poe. He is most well known for his novel about Philadelphia, titled Quaker City. The book is considered to be one of the first American muckraking novels. Muckrakers write to uncover misconduct or muck in public life. The book cast the city elites in an unflattering light and explored the crooked underbelly of the city. The elites did not much care for the book, but the working class made it the best-selling novel in the country. In 1849, Lepard helped found the Brotherhood of the Union, which later became known as the Brotherhood of America. It was a secret benevolent society, a kind of Freemasons for the working man. The Brotherhood issued badges and medals. They borrowed from names and symbols of the American Revolution. They promoted a shorter workday, education, and election reform. By 1850, the Brotherhood had expanded to 19 states. Lepard was elected Supreme Washington, the highest title for the leadership position of the group. He died a few years later, succumbing to tuberculosis at the age of just 31. But the Brotherhood continued long after his death into the late 20th century. In a book about New York, Lepard once wrote, "Enormous wealth is only enormous crime. Yes, we may phrase it as we will, the immense concentration of wealth in the hands of any one man or in the hands of any corporate power is an evil fraught with more danger to the happiness and liberty of the nation than all the crowned tyrants of the world." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
People are baffled by the surreal saga of George Santos, the bizarre Republican Congress critter who is a bottomless sinkhole of lies. How could he think that he, a highly visible public figure, could get away with such blatant fabrications? Perhaps he thought he was a corporation. After all, these multi-billion-dollar brand name outfits routinely lie about who they really are. Crass polluters shamelessly run PR campaigns claiming to be environmentalists. Price gougers pose as consumer champions, and economic downsizers glorify themselves as visionary creators. They gild their resumes for their own profit, and they get away with it. So George might have thought, I'll follow the corporate model, just make stuff up, like soulless tobacco executives do. For decades, they killed millions of people for profit, flat out lying that nicotine was not addictive, that their cancer sticks were not deadly, and that they did not target their ads to children. But wait, today's tobacco titans claim to be born-again public health champions. We have an unprecedented opportunity to move beyond smoking, said the head honcho of the Philip Morris brand, asserting that Big Tobacco would henceforth back the public push for a, quote, smoke-free future. Philip Morris garnered widespread praise for this bold stand, but it was a deliberate lie. Even as the executives' lips moved, the tobacco giants were spending billions on lobbyists and PR campaigns to gut state and national proposals to prevent addiction and actually lead to a smoke-free future. This is Jim Hightower saying, yes, we should be outraged that Santos, a flagrant political fake, has swindled his way into Congress, and he should be ousted. But what will Congress do about the far more destructive corporate deceivers who are George Santos's role models? Their lies kill people, yet they're still welcome in the halls of Congress.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, amazingly, the email box full of angry conservatives saying, "We never wanted to touch Social Security. You're lying." And look, even the representatives, the people who are basically saying, "Don't tell us what we said. Don't say the thing that we said we were going to do." Mike Lee being just the feigned outrage. I mean, that was really, in the best kind of Bill Burr moment of, who, me? What? Wow. What an amazing display. Got to give credit. Academy Awards all around. And here to share some thoughts on the State of the Union address and the performances. Look, Republicans, amazing performances. Also got yourself kind of in a twist. I've asked my good friend Craig Harrington to come talk with us. Craig's the chief cook and bottle washer over there at Media Matters for America. Craig, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise, it's always great to be on.
So, let's start with that the first thing. Don't tell us what we said. We know what we said, and we didn't want anybody else to know it. Are you surprised at the Mike Lee thing is just amazing. That was Academy Award winning stuff right there.
Yeah, and the Mike Lee, for anyone who wasn't watching the State of the Union, I imagine there are plenty, maybe 30 million people watched, which means 300 million people didn't. For people who weren't watching, President Biden pointed out the simple fact that some Republicans had a plan to, quote, sunset Social Security and Medicare. His use of that verb was not an accident. The verb was actually used on page 38 of former National Republican Senate Committee Chairman Rick Scott's policy agenda for the 2022 midterms. He said that all federal legislation would sunset every 5 years, and worthwhile legislation would be reauthorized by Congress. Now, what that would mean is that a potential political logjam could be created every 5 years over not just Social Security and Medicare, but every single piece of federally authorized legislation. So the President Biden actually was being more articulate and more delicate than the Republicans deserved. But the most interesting thing about this is, so President Biden says, basically, some of you, not all of you, want to cut Social Security and Medicare. And there's shocks and guffaws. There's people screaming at him from the audience. It was like he was giving a speech to the House of Commons in the UK, not to the House of Representatives in the United States. But there is Mike Lee, just agape, his jaws on the floor, and sitting right next to Mike Lee, right next to him, is Senator Rick Scott, the National Republican Senatorial Committee chairman, who had a plan to sunset Medicare. It was in a plan that he published, which was so unpopular and so shocking to many Republicans who actually wanted to win races, that Mitch McConnell had to come out the day it was released and disavow it. Mitch McConnell, a Republican who wants to cut Social Security, came out and disavowed Senator Rick Scott personally. So this wouldn't have been surprising to Mike Lee. They all had conversations about this in the media and in their caucus group during 2022. But making it even more insane is that Mike Lee, there's this fascinating piece of opposition research video that's been circulating for a number of years, but it sort of reappeared in the last couple of days. In 2010, when Mike Lee was running for Utah Senate as part of the Tea Party revolution, the reaction against Barack Obama and the supposed overgrowth of the administrative state, Mike Lee specifically campaigned on video saying that his goal is to uproot and end Social Security. He wants to end Social Security. He wants to end Medicare and Medicaid and other government entitlement programs. That was his stated campaign position on a video that has been circulating in the public for 12 years. So the idea that Mike Lee would be shocked to hear that some Republicans want to target Social Security when sitting next to the man who wanted to sunset the program, and while being an explicit supporter of cutting Social Security, not cutting it, ending Social Security.
Taking it out by the roots.
Stupendous.
Yeah.
It is stupendous. Up by the roots is the direct quote.
Yeah, but that's not new. I mean, you had, if you remember Paul Ryan, evidently he was doing keg stands, reading Ayn Rand, dreaming about, fantasizing about, fetishizing, destroying Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And I don't know, again, I went to college, I did the keg scene too. I don't ever remember the kind of parties where let's kick Granny to the curb, let's steal Granny's pension and end. So I don't remember those parties. But according to him, he attended them.
Yeah, Paul Ryan, and that quote is actually from an interview he was giving and a panel discussion that was being moderated by National Review editor Rich Lowry, and I think it was 2013 or something like that, maybe even earlier. And he talked about how they had been talking about cutting these programs since they were sharing beers around the keg in college, and they're a little bit older than me, but not that much older. And I can't imagine what it was like to be in college thinking about cutting social safety net programs for the public. But it's interesting that you bring up Paul Ryan, because what we're here to talk about is how this event was covered, how this conversation about Social Security was covered, and how it is sort of driven out in the aftermath of President Biden's what is largely being seen as a very effective State of the Union address. Paul Ryan was one of the most recent Republican speakers of the House. The current Republican Speaker of the House is Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy and Paul Ryan used to make up 2/3 of what was then called the Republicans' quote young gun trio. So it was Eric Cantor, Paul Ryan, and Kevin McCarthy. I always call him Mike McCarthy, who's a football coach. Yeah. Kevin McCarthy. They wrote a book called Young Guns, and it explicitly stated their plans, and they used the word reform and strengthen to talk about their plans to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. But they had a whole book in 2010 that was their campaign cycle book as they planned to kind of take the policy reins of the Republican House caucus and eventually the entire Republican Party. 2/3 of that book's authorship went on to become Speaker of the House. Eric Cantor nearly became Speaker of the House. And they have an explicit agenda in their book that they put their names on to cut Social Security by privatizing it and then devolving certain payments for other Social Security measures like SSDI, the disability insurance component, turning that into block grants that are then provided out to the states. Block grants don't grow as fast as traditional apportionments, and it would result in a long-term cut.
Right.
These people they've literally attached their names to this Media Matters covered this pretty extensively, and I apologize if I feel like I'm simmering at an 11, it's because I am. Republicans have been fighting against Social Security since 1936. That's 87 years. 87 years where they have complained about it every single year. They didn't really start fighting against it until the end of the Eisenhower administration, because Eisenhower correctly said that touching it would be the third rail in American politics. But Republicans have wanted to get rid of Social Security. They've wanted to root it out and uproot it since 1936. It has been a century of this. And so to pretend now that this isn't the plan is just willful ignorance on their part, or rather, it's an intentionally misleading on their part. And for media to go along with it, which unfortunately many mainstream and of course all right-wing outlets have gone along with, requires a willful ignorance that is frankly difficult to understand or believe.
Well, again, it comes back to the frame of we've got, in order to save it, we have to kill it. This is what we have to do. Well, because it's unsustainable, it's going broke. We've heard the frames, and I've been hammered with them over the last several hours of people going, well, they don't want to do, you don't want to take Social Security. They just want to do X, whatever the latest scheme is, privatize, give us our own accounts, and all of these. You go, no, they're trying to destroy Social Security as it is. It is something. It is the baseline. It is the line in the sand that says no one falls below this. It's the greatest anti-poverty program this country has ever devised, and they want to destroy that last part of the social safety net that they've been destroying for decades.
And for anyone who you mentioned something, killing it to save it, harming it to save it. This was something that actually Byron Donalds, who's a Republican member of the House, who very briefly flirted with pretending he was going to be the Speaker of the House during the 15 rounds that Kevin McCarthy was forced to go through with his public humiliation in his pursuit of the speakership earlier in January. Byron Donalds was being interviewed on Joy Reid's program on MSNBC about a month ago about Republican plans to cut Social Security, which he claimed is going to be insolvent. And he had this whole rigmarole. He's a certified financial planner. He's an investor. He understands how Social Security works, and he was using very precise language from the trustees report about Social Security and about how the trust fund, so the excess money in Social Security, is scheduled to run out sometime in the next 12 to 15 years based on some factors. And there are two things we can do. Either we can let it run out, and when it runs out, we can continue to make Social Security payments up to 85% of what would otherwise be provided, or we could do something to restore the trust fund. Either we could switch Social Security to being funded by income taxes, which would guarantee its solvency forever, or we could increase the payroll tax cap. I make less than the payroll tax cap. The vast majority of Americans make less than $125,000 a year. If you make more than $125,000 a year, every dollar after that doesn't get taxed into the payroll tax cap and doesn't go into Social Security. So like LeBron James, who makes $100 million a year, only pays Social Security taxes on the first $125,000, which is the same my mom pays on the $30,000 or $40,000 a year that she makes. And the simplest solution is just to raise the payroll tax cap. That will fund Social Security forever, literally forever. Or you could cut it in 12 or 15 years when the trust fund runs out. But what Republicans want to do, what Byron Donalds wants to do, and what he was defending during that MSNBC interview, is he wants to cut it now so that we don't have to make cuts in the future. And frankly, the simplest solution I actually saw was from Nobel Prize winning economist and New York Times columnist Paul Krugman. He said, just cut it in 12 years. Like, that's been his argument actually for about a decade. Social Security was supposed to be insolvent already, and those trustees' reports have largely been incorrect. It's always been more solvent than they expected it to be, but it was supposed to be insolvent in 2022, 2023, 2024. And a decade ago or longer ago, Paul Krugman started arguing just like, rather than cutting it to save it now, just cut it when you have to cut it. If the trust fund ever runs out, if we ever allow it to run out, make the cuts then. But in the meantime, the most important anti-poverty program in the history of the world, Social Security, will remain at 100% until we are forced to make a change. We're not being forced to make a change right now. Republicans are just trying to use this as a forcing mechanism to get their policy preferences, which is to weaken Social Security, which has been their position for 9 decades.
Right, and they're holding the globe hostage over this debt ceiling thing. Look, I get that you want to destroy Social Security. I get ideologically you believe that the government can't or shouldn't do anything. I understand and this is the weird thing about Republican voters over the last couple of days that I've had conversations with, because I haven't found many Republican voters wanting to privatize Social Security, yet their ideology is free market privatization, this kind of thought process that their Republican leaders are all on board with. Do you see that there's a disconnect between the people who vote for these folks and the people who are casting the votes in our House and our Senate? Because I'm seeing a massive disconnect on this issue. There's a lot of disinformation on the right about what their own leadership wants to do.
This is actually a fascinating instance of the right-wing media, political and media echo chamber has been so successful in sheltering itself from the rest of reality and from mainstream media and from any legitimate critique, that media and political actors today, particularly people who are young enough to have been raised through this system, to be raised in this disinformation landscape, they might not actually realize that what they're talking about is only popular inside of this sandbox in which they're operating. Cutting Social Security is only important, necessary, or popular on Fox News, on Fox Business, in the pages of the National Review. If you talk to someone who votes for Republicans, like many of my own family members, they don't want to cut Social Security, or rather, they don't want to cut their own Social Security, though they might be willing to cut my Social Security. All I want is to pay payroll taxes so my parents can retire with dignity, even if a couple of those parents might want to cut my Social Security one day. All I want is to make my payroll taxes and allow people to retire with dignity.
Yeah. Now, the other side of this, Craig, and I haven't met very many parents who go, screw my kids. I haven't met them. I have met a whole bunch of people who go, it's the others, it's the boogeymen, it's that because the right does a masterful job of giving them someone to blame. There's always someone to blame. There's always a victim, and there's always someone who's crushing down on them, and there's always someone to blame. And it's not you and your kids. No, it's we give all these illegals money. I've heard that so much that evidently all they have to do is get here. And then they get to collect Social Security for life, which I have yet to find anyone who does that. But then again, it's like that welfare queen driving around in the Cadillac, drinking Dom and eating steak all day. I haven't found her either. They make these characters, these figures that they then can blame for everything that aren't really fixed in reality.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. When you talk to real people about what a policy position like cutting Social Security or cutting any entitlement program, reducing national defense authorizations, really cutting any spending whatsoever, you run into people who suddenly don't support that. You might talk about waste and fraud and abuse in the military, or waste and fraud and abuse in the Medicare system. But the fact is, we have 76 independent inspectors general, and we have a government accountability office. We actually have really good data on government waste, fraud, and abuse, and it runs at about 5%. Now, 5% of $6 trillion is a huge amount of money. But 5% of $6 trillion is not going to solve the national budget deficit. It's not going to erase the federal national debt. 5 or 6% is actually considerably lower than the corporate overhead losses that you'd see from private insurance companies, or from the police, or from private security companies. The government actually runs very efficiently because there is so much oversight of the government. And once you start to actually think about how much abuse there is in the system and how much the deficit is, how much people think that they want to take back from the government, you start to realize that people actually don't really support these policies in the real world.
Yep.
The only people support them are these theoretical positionings that you see from political and media elites who are operating in an echo chamber that is not permeable to the real world or to real society. And people who use that media and political ecosystem for their information are widely misled by that echo chamber. The moment you take them outside of it and you start to have a real honest conversation about the ramifications of what these policies would be, you see people immediately abandon them.
You're right. Who's the Republican representative? Gave some speeches a couple of days ago where he held up a blank piece of paper and said, "These are all the people who called my office to cut spending." Basically admitting what you just said. Nobody wants to cut spending. Nobody wants to cut. We want our tax dollars to be the most efficiently possible. But I think the vast majority of working people say, look, we need to go back to a tax code like the good socialist president, Dwight Eisenhower. We need to start taxing these rich people who've been walking away, these big corporations who are pocketing billions and billions and paying zero in taxes. We need to start taxing these people and funding the things that we want and need.
Yeah, let's return to the alcohol and gasoline and tobacco taxes of socialist President Richard Nixon and the income taxes at 70%. The vast majority of people don't actually support the ideas that come out of the right-wing media ecosystem. And it's important to remember that because the right-wing media ecosystem is entirely impermeable to thought. It's entirely impermeable to fact check. They do not respond to outside stimuli. They're being driven by their own interests and they're being driven by their own ideology, but they're not really getting much of this cue from the voting public. And one of the people, oddly, who understands this is Donald Trump. In the past few weeks, as Republicans started talking about holding the government hostage through the debt ceiling crisis, which they have manufactured to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and other entitlement programs, the person who came out and told them not to do this, don't do this in 2024 when we need people to vote for us, was Donald Trump. Donald Trump lives in Florida. Social Security and Medicare recipients make up a gigantic proportion of his white working class base. His overwhelmingly, predominantly white voting base are largely elderly and retirees. These are people who have paid into these systems and who deserve to get payouts from them. These are people who are entitled to these services. And Donald Trump needs their votes. And he's asking Republicans not to do this. And yet many Republican representatives who operate in the safest possible gerrymandered districts, who get all of their information from Fox and from the National Review, maybe if you're lucky, they own a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, which actually does have some good reporting on top of its insane editorial board. These representatives, they don't operate in the real world, and their electoral positions and their political opinions are not based on the simple realities that you have to face when you're running, say, as a statewide or as a national federal candidate. Oddly enough, the voice of reason in the Republican Party on Social Security is Donald Trump. And the most unpopular thing he did during his administration wasn't the baby cages. It wasn't all the other things. It wasn't the Muslim ban. The most unpopular thing he did was adopting Republican orthodoxy on tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations. And that was actually where his popularity bottomed out in December of 2017. And the Republican Party had never recovered from that. But it could have been even worse because remember, they tried to repeal the ACA, which was deeply unpopular. And many Republicans during their budgeting and their tax cuts negotiations, they wanted to take a shot in Social Security and Medicare. And the guy who told them, I'm not signing that, was Donald Trump.
So we have Donald Trump to thank for Social Security and Medicare not being, and that's going to be a hard pill for some to swallow, but you're not wrong.
It's not that he's to thank for it. He was just purely self-interested. Donald Trump doesn't care about Social Security recipients. He doesn't care about retirees. He doesn't care about pensioners. He just wants to win Florida, because if he doesn't win Florida's electoral votes, he's a dead letter as a national political candidate. But the Republicans who are running the show in the House of Representatives, they don't need Florida's votes. Kevin McCarthy doesn't need a single vote out of Florida. And so all he's trying to do is hold together his coalition long enough to keep that gavel.
So last question I've got for you. Is this since, and I thought Biden did a masterful job of spinning their outrage and their you lie and all the other stuff that the children couldn't hold their water. And spinning this into them going, we would never do that, because now the message is Republicans are never going to do it. They swore they weren't going to do it. We saw it on TV. They're not going to do it.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is the Republicans' protests actually convinced some mainstream reporters like Jonathan Karl from ABC News. His immediate reaction after the speech was like, well, Biden was out over his skis there. He was embellishing with Republicans. No Republicans actually want to cut Social Security. Of course they do. We just named them. We could have this conversation for hours and hours. Thousands of Republicans are on the record saying they want to cut Social Security. But the fascinating thing was going into that speech, Biden was getting savaged by mainstream press. And he had a wonderful speech. And that performance in particular, where he walked the Republicans into this box canyon and and tricked them all in front of 30 million viewers to attesting that they would never touch Social Security and Medicare as part of budget or debt ceiling negotiations. That was a masterclass. And the fascinating thing was when CNN cut to the speech, the very last piece of commentary was from a Republican strategist who's on their payroll named Scott Jennings. And Scott Jennings said that the thing Biden needs to do tonight is announce his retirement, like resign the presidency or announce that he's not running for re-election. That's the only thing he could do that would have a winning speech. And the panel more or less agreed with him. Democratic strategist Van Jones, who was a big Trump fan, actually thought that was a crazy position, to his credit. And then immediately after the speech, CNN was just blown away by Biden's performance and how he had gotten this raucous, frankly, really inappropriate Republican audience on board with defending Social Security to the hilt. People thought it was a masterclass. And literally, the mainstream outlets were calling for him to resign at 8:58 p.m. And by 10:15 p.m., they were entirely on board with this being perhaps the best speech he's ever given of his political career, and the thing that's going to launch him into 2024. You just don't see stuff like that coming out of State of the Union. The State of the Union is important, but they're never this important, and this one was important.
Oh, this was a BFD to steal a Biden frame. But Craig, I appreciate the time. As always, good stuff. I look forward to talking to you again real soon, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Our good friend Craig Harrington. He is the research director over there at Media Matters for America. MediaMatters.org is the website. If you want to check out the work that they do, we'll get links out on social media. How you can do that. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So Brett Favre in the news. And not for a good reason. Evidently, Brett Favre is suing Shannon Sharpe, Pat McAfee, and Mississippi Auditor Shad White. And why is he suing them? Well, defamation of character. Evidently, Brett and his New York lawyers have decided that, well, we're going to go after them for telling what is, the way I'm looking at it is the truth. Now, I know someone who Favre threatened with a defamation suit. So I'm waiting for it to trickle down. And when I talk to my friend about this, I'm going, the best thing that could happen is Favre sues you, because there's this thing called discovery. And that means all of the things that he claims aren't true, like the millions of dollars that they have records of him being able to put into his pocket. Well, it was $1.1 million that he was paid for speeches that he never gave, and $5 million that he lobbied for his alma mater, the University of Southern Mississippi, where his daughter was playing volleyball, for a new volleyball court. And here's the kicker. You know where the money came from? Came from the food stamp programs. They were literally stealing food out of the mouths of children. Yeah, Brett, this is doing wonders for your image. Keep it up. Sue more people. Sue more people. Wow. Know when to stop. Know when to stop. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.